lingered just outside, hidden in the shadow of an oak tree. Through the cafe's softly lit windows, he saw her, Lily, sitting at their table, leaning toward a man he didn't recognize. The sight twisted something deep within him, the weight of her laughter mingling painfully with memories of happier days. He recalled the countless nights they had spent here, wrapped in warmth and familiar smiles, back when this place had been theirs alone. Now it was a theater for a lie he hadn't wanted to believe. As Ethan watched, he fought to keep his expression calm, though his pulse hammered in his chest. He noted every detail, the way Lily touched her hair, the look she reserved for her companion, one that should have been his. The man across from her seemed oblivious to the tension gripping Ethan from his place outside. They laughed together, sharing an easy intimacy that left Ethan rooted to the spot, helplessly watching what he could no longer deny. For a brief moment he considered bursting in, ending the facade with a confrontation, but something held him back, a cold resolve hardening his heart. He stepped away, taking a long, steady breath as he turned toward home. There was no need to act on impulse. No, this demanded patience. When Lily returned that night, he would greet her as always, mask his anger behind a knowing smile, and wait. Let her think she was in control. He would handle this betrayal his way, on his terms. Ethan drove home in silence, each mile compounding the weight of what he had just seen. Lily's laughter echoed in his mind, mingling with the image of her leaning in close to that stranger, her fingers playing absently with the edge of her wine glass the same way she had once done with him. His hands tightened on the steering wheel, knuckles white against the dark leather. He forced himself to breathe, focusing on the empty stretch of road ahead, but the betrayal simmered beneath his calm exterior, swirling into a potent resolve. When he arrived home, the house felt colder, emptier than usual. In the dim light of the entryway, he shrugged off his coat and let his eyes adjust to the shadows. Their wedding photo hung on the wall by the stairs, her familiar smile preserved behind glass, a bittersweet reminder of the woman he thought he knew. He considered, for a fleeting moment, taking it down, removing this relic of a life built on promises that now felt as fragile as glass. But he turned away, leaving it there as a silent testament to what she had broken. Ethan moved to the living room and sat in his favorite armchair, the one that had always been a place of comfort. Tonight, though, it felt stiff and unwelcoming. He leaned back, clasping his hands and watching the slow tick of the clock. Lily would be home soon. He imagined the precise moment she would step through the door, slipping into her usual smile and offering a casual explanation about clearing her mind, as though it hadn't been a lie. The hours stretched. Ethan felt the coldness seep into his resolve, solidifying into something unyielding. He wouldn't confront her tonight, he decided. That would be too simple, too clean. No, she needed to feel the weight of her deception as he had felt it, to understand the hollow, gnawing emptiness she had left in her wake. She needed to sense the consequences of her choices creeping up around her, slow and inevitable. At last he heard her footsteps in the driveway, the sound punctuated by the click of her heels against the stone. He didn't move, keeping his gaze fixed on the dim hallway as she stepped inside. She didn't see him right away, glancing down as she slipped off her shoes. Then she looked up, and surprise flickered across her face, quickly replaced by a warm, practiced smile. "Oh, you're still up." Her voice was cheerful, almost relieved, as if she had been expecting him to be asleep, unaware. "Yes," he replied, keeping his tone even, casual. He met her gaze with a steady calm that gave away nothing. "How was your night?" She hesitated just for a heartbeat before smoothing over the pause with a dismissive shrug. "Oh, it was good. I just needed a little time to myself." "To clear your mind?" he asked, his tone light, his eyes sharp. She laughed softly, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Exactly," she said, though her voice wavered just slightly. "You know how it is." He nodded slowly. "Of course." He forced a small smile, leaning back into the armchair. "I'm glad you enjoyed it. Everyone needs a night like that now and then." Something in his gaze made her pause. He saw it in her eyes, a glimmer of uncertainty, as if she sensed something off-kilter but couldn't place it. She lingered for a moment, her expression faltering before she looked away, busying herself with her coat and bag, anything to escape his silent scrutiny. "Good night, Ethan," she said, her voice softer now, almost tentative. "Good night, Lily," he replied, his tone gentle, betraying none of the turmoil within. As she disappeared down the hall, he closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. Let her feel safe for now, he thought. It was only a matter of time. In the morning, the house was quiet. Ethan had barely slept, yet he felt strangely clear-headed, his mind running through the events of the previous night like a finely tuned clock. He replayed every moment, Lily's laughter echoing across the cafe, the ease in her posture as she leaned into that man's space. It was a cruel replay, but one he forced himself to endure as he prepared for what would come next. He moved through his morning routine with deliberate calm, as though performing a well-practiced ritual. Coffee brewed, eggs sizzled in the pan, and by the time Lily drifted into the kitchen, the table was set. She looked surprised to see him there, an uneasy smile flickering across her face. "Wow, breakfast," she murmured, slipping into her chair with a small laugh. "This is a rare treat." Ethan smiled, glancing at her over the rim of his coffee cup. "Thought we could start the day together," he replied smoothly, offering her a plate. "Busy week ahead." She nodded, her gaze fixed on her fork as she toyed with her food. He watched her, noting the shadows under her eyes, the faint flush that seemed to betray her discomfort. She shifted in her seat, glancing up at him with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Did you sleep well?" she asked. A casual question, but her tone held an edge, as if she were probing, testing his mood. "Well enough," he replied, holding her gaze, "though I had a lot on my mind." She hesitated, her fingers tightening around her fork. "Anything specific?" she asked, trying to sound casual. Ethan shrugged, taking another sip of his coffee. "Just work," he replied, letting the silence stretch between them. "And us?" The fork clattered to her plate. Her eyes widened slightly before she quickly forced a laugh. "Us? Oh, come on, Ethan, don't tell me you're worried about us." "Everything's fine." He nodded, allowing her to believe she had reassured him. "I know," he said quietly. "I'm lucky, aren't I?" She paused, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes, before she looked down, refocusing on her breakfast. "Of course you are," she replied with a smile, though there was a trace of nervousness beneath her words. He let her think she'd controlled the conversation, though inside he noted her every move. There was a fragility to her that hadn't been there before, a subtle crack in her polished facade. He felt a dark satisfaction, knowing he'd unsettled her, that his calm demeanor was chipping away at her confidence, planting the seeds of doubt. As they finished breakfast, he stood and gathered the dishes, offering her a warm, practiced smile. "I'll clean up. You should get ready for work." She nodded, grateful for the chance to leave the room, but as she moved to brush past him, he caught her wrist gently, holding her for just a moment longer than necessary. She froze, her breath catching, as his fingers loosened and he gave her hand a soft pat. "Have a good day, Lily," he murmured, his voice soft yet laced with a gravity she couldn't miss. She mumbled a quick reply and retreated upstairs, her footsteps hurried. Ethan waited until he heard the sound of the bedroom door close before he finished cleaning up, his mind racing with the next phase of his plan. The careful patience of last night had paid off, and now, as she grew wary, uncertain, he knew he had the advantage. He had become a ghost in their marriage, watching, waiting, and with every silent step, drawing her deeper into a trap she had unknowingly set for herself. Ethan waited until Lily left for work, her hurried footsteps echoing down the driveway before he closed the door with a quiet finality. The moment she was gone, he felt a shift within him, a cold determination settling into place. He moved through the house with purpose, his mind focused on gathering every trace of her betrayal. She had left clues, of that he was certain. Perhaps she'd been careless, or perhaps in her mind she'd convinced herself that he'd never find out. Either way, he would leave no stone unturned. He began in the bedroom, where the lingering scent of her perfume clung to the sheets. He searched through drawers, her vanity places he rarely touched, careful to leave everything just as he found it. Beneath a stack of scarves, he discovered a small receipt tucked away, nearly forgotten. He scanned it, a local florist, a bouquet purchased just days earlier. She hadn't brought any flowers home. A gift, then? A gift meant for someone else. Ethan felt a chill as he carefully returned the receipt to its hiding spot. His suspicions were now grounded in tangible proof, each new discovery another crack in the fragile illusion she maintained. But it was only a beginning. He moved to her closet next, eyes narrowing at a coat he'd never seen her wear. It was elegant, lined with a soft satin interior, and very unlike the practical style she usually chose. He lifted the collar, revealing a faint smear of makeup too high to be her own. Another man's presence lingering, however faintly, on something that belonged to her. He lowered the coat, breathing slowly. The game she was playing, her careful deceit, had only served to confirm what he had known last night. Lily was no longer his. But this wasn't a matter of reclaiming something lost. No, it was about allowing her to unravel, to face her own web of lies. He left the closet untouched and made his way to her office, where stacks of paperwork cluttered her desk. She was methodical about most things, but her work documents often held a haphazard organization, making them easy to sift through. Hidden among the bills and receipts, he found a handwritten note, penned in unfamiliar handwriting. Last night was unforgettable. Until next time. A short message, but its impact was swift and sharp. Ethan felt a pang of something anger, perhaps before it dissolved, replaced by a steely calm. She had left her trail carelessly, a loose collection of breadcrumbs leading him directly to the truth she thought she could hide. He returned the note to its place and glanced around the room, assuring himself everything was as it had been. There was no need for confrontation, not yet. It was enough to know, to hold this knowledge close, like a weapon carefully sheathed. He wanted her to sense something shifting, an invisible force pulling tight around her. Satisfied, Ethan left the office and returned to the living room. He looked out the window, watching the slow, steady movement of the lake, calm and undisturbed, as though it too harbored secrets beneath its surface. This place, their special spot, was now nothing more than a backdrop to her deception. And as the day moved forward, Ethan prepared himself for the next steps. He would give her a taste of her own dishonesty, not with anger, but with precision. When Lily returned home that evening, he would be waiting, a quiet observer, masking his resentment with a calculated gentleness. She had started this game, but Ethan intended to finish it, on his terms and in his time. Ethan waited until Lily left for work, her hurried footsteps echoing down the driveway before he closed the door with a quiet finality. The moment she was gone, he felt a shift within him, a cold determination settling into place. He moved through the house with purpose, his mind focused on gathering every trace of her betrayal. She had left clues of that, he was certain. Perhaps she'd been careless, or perhaps, in her mind, she'd convinced herself that he'd never find out. Either way, he would leave no stone unturned. He began in the bedroom, where the lingering scent of her perfume clung to the sheets. He searched through drawers, her vanity, places he rarely touched, careful to leave everything just as he found it. Beneath a stack of scarves, he discovered a small receipt tucked away, nearly forgotten. He scanned it, a local florist, a bouquet purchased just days earlier. She hadn't brought any flowers home. A gift, then. A gift meant for someone else. Ethan felt a chill as he carefully returned the receipt to its hiding spot. His suspicions were now grounded in tangible proof, each new discovery another crack in the fragile illusion she maintained. But it was only a beginning. He moved to her closet next, eyes narrowing at a coat he'd never seen her wear. It was elegant, lined with a soft satin interior, and very unlike the practical style she usually chose. He lifted the collar, revealing a faint smear of makeup too high to be her own. Another man's presence lingering, however faintly, on something that belonged to her. He lowered the coat, breathing slowly. The game she was playing, her careful deceit, had only served to confirm what he had known last night. Lily was no longer his. But this wasn't a matter of reclaiming something lost. No, it was about allowing her to unravel, to face her own web of lies. He left the closet untouched and made his way to her office, where stacks of paperwork cluttered her desk. She was methodical about most things, but her work documents often held a haphazard organization, making them easy to sift through. Hidden among the bills and receipts, he found a handwritten note, penned in unfamiliar handwriting. Last night was unforgettable. Until next time. A short message, but its impact was swift and sharp. Ethan felt a pang of something anger, perhaps before it dissolved, replaced by a steely calm. She had left her trail carelessly, a loose collection of breadcrumbs leading him directly to the truth she thought she could hide. He returned the note to its place and glanced around the room, assuring himself everything was as it had been. There was no need for confrontation, not yet. It was enough to know, to hold this knowledge close, like a weapon carefully sheathed. He wanted her to sense something shifting, an invisible force pulling tight around her. Satisfied, Ethan left the office and returned to the living room. He looked out the window, watching the slow, steady movement of the lake, calm and undisturbed, as though it too harbored secrets beneath its surface. This place, their special spot, was now nothing more than a backdrop to her deception. And as the day moved forward, Ethan prepared himself for the next steps. He would give her a taste of her own dishonesty, not with anger, but with precision. When Lily returned home that evening, he would be waiting, a quiet observer, masking his resentment with a calculated gentleness. She had started this game, but Ethan intended to finish it, on his terms and in his time. As dusk settled over the house, Ethan prepared himself for Lily's arrival. He had spent the day in careful contemplation, feeling the weight of his next steps. He would begin with subtlety, a gentle erosion of her confidence, slowly tightening the boundaries of their shared space until there was no room left for her secrets. He wanted her to feel the walls close in, to sense that something intangible was slipping from her control. The headlights flashed in the driveway, and a moment later he heard her key in the lock. Ethan waited, leaning casually against the kitchen counter, forcing his expression into a warm, unassuming smile. As Lily entered, she offered him the same, though he could detect a slight tremor in her hands as she set down her bag. "Long day?" he asked, his tone neutral, keeping his voice soft and attentive. He noticed the way her shoulders relaxed slightly at his calmness, the fleeting look of relief in her eyes. "Yeah," she replied, sighing with a practiced air of exhaustion. "Busy day at the office. I'm just glad to be home." She moved toward him, hesitating as if deciding whether to offer a casual kiss. But he didn't make a move, keeping the distance between them. He smiled. "You must be starving. I thought I'd make dinner for us tonight, your favorite." He noted her surprise, the faint flicker of guilt behind her smile as she accepted. "Really?" She laughed a little too lightly. "That's so sweet, Ethan, thank you." He poured her a glass of wine as she sat at the table, and he joined her, casually stirring the pasta on the stove. The aroma filled the room, and they fell into comfortable small talk, their exchanges careful, almost like strangers who had just met. It was perfect. He let her believe that things were as they always were, that she was safe here, and for a time she seemed to forget the tension of the morning. "So," he said finally, setting her plate in front of her, "I was thinking we should spend more time together. It feels like we're always so busy, don't you think?" Her fork paused midair, and she looked up, her eyes searching his face. "More time?" She echoed, her voice guarded. "Yeah, I thought maybe we could take a weekend trip soon." He leaned back in his chair, watching her reaction closely. "We could go back to the lake. Like we used to." A silence settled between them, her expression flickering between surprise and unease. He saw the guarded wall go up in her eyes, her mind racing as she scrambled for an answer. I don't know if I can get away right now," she said, too quickly. "Work has been really hectic." "Oh, of course," he replied, keeping his tone light, shrugging as if the suggestion had been casual. "I just thought it might be nice to relive old memories." She gave him a strained smile, quickly looking down at her plate. Her appetite seemingly vanished. "Maybe, in a few weeks?" "Sure," he replied, with a dismissive wave of his hand, signaling it wasn't important. But he could see the effect of his words in her sudden tension, her quickened breath. She was already on edge, and he knew he had succeeded in planting the seed of doubt. They ate the rest of the meal in silence, his every word and gesture calculated to keep her guessing, to pull her deeper into the uncertainty he had begun to build. When she excused herself to the bathroom, he listened to her hurried footsteps, each step a testament to the silent panic she tried to contain. Alone, Ethan allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. Tonight had gone precisely as planned. He had chipped away at her calm, peeling back the layers of her defenses. It wouldn't be long before her confidence would crumble entirely, and she would be left wondering if he knew everything or if he was just beginning to see the truth. That night, as they lay side by side in the dark, Ethan felt the quiet distance between them stretch into something vast, almost tangible. He could sense Lily's tension even with her back turned to him, her breathing irregular, as if she were fighting against sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence that had grown in the space where trust had once been. Tonight, he would push her further, test her limits, until the walls she'd built around her secret began to crumble. After what felt like an hour, he shifted, his voice cutting through the stillness. "Lily," he said softly, as if speaking to a dream. She tensed slightly, but didn't respond. He continued, his tone calm, almost detached. "Do you ever wonder if we've changed? If things aren't like they used to be?" She stirred, her voice a sleepy murmur. "What do you mean?" He took a measured breath, letting the words linger between them before replying. "I mean, don't you ever feel that we're drifting? Like there's this distance and I can't quite reach you anymore?" He softened his voice, feigning vulnerability. "Sometimes I feel like I don't really know you." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, slowly, she rolled over to face him, her eyes wide in the dim light filtering through the window. "Ethan," she whispered, her tone guarded, "of course you know me. What are you talking about?" He held her gaze, letting a hint of sadness seep into his expression. "I don't know. Lately I feel like we're just different, like you have secrets. It's probably just my own insecurities," he added quickly, his eyes downcast. "I shouldn't have said anything." She reached out, placing a hand gently on his arm. "Hey," she murmured, a slight tremor in her voice. "You don't have to feel that way. We're just busy, that's all. Nothing's wrong. I love you." Her words were reassuring, but her eyes betrayed her. He could see the flicker of guilt, the fear she tried to mask with a soft smile. She was slipping, and he knew it. "I know you do," he replied, offering a faint smile. "Maybe I just need to stop overthinking things." "Exactly." She let out a nervous laugh, pulling her hand away as if afraid he would sense the truth in her touch. "There's nothing to worry about, Ethan. Everything is fine." He watched as she settled back into her pillow, her eyes closing, her body relaxing into what she thought was a temporary reprieve. But Ethan knew he'd planted another seed, one that would sprout in the quiet hours of the night when she thought he was asleep. He wanted her to lie awake, to feel that gnawing uncertainty build, knowing she was just one slip away from exposing everything. When her breathing eventually slowed, Ethan waited a moment longer before he rose quietly from the bed. Moving silently, he slipped into the hallway, careful not to wake her. He needed time alone, time to process his next steps. As he made his way downstairs, he replayed the evening's exchanges, each word and look a piece of a larger puzzle he was meticulously arranging. In the darkened living room, he stood before their framed wedding photo once more, his gaze hardening. There had been a time when he would have done anything to preserve what they had, to keep her happy and close. Now he felt only the cold satisfaction of knowing she was as alone in her betrayal as he had been. She thought her secrets were safe, wrapped neatly in the lies she told herself to justify her actions. But Ethan was done with letting her hide. He would dismantle her carefully constructed facade piece by piece, until there was nothing left for her to cling to. And when she realized he knew everything, when she finally confronted the consequences of her choices, he would be there, calm and unyielding, watching her unravel. The next few days unfolded like a carefully orchestrated dance, with Ethan controlling every step, every glance, every moment. He kept his tone light, his gaze steady, watching as Lily fell deeper into his web of quiet suspicion. He continued to drop small hints, an offhand comment about loyalty, a mention of an old friend's broken marriage, each detail deliberately chosen to unsettle her, to make her question how much he really knew. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, he casually turned the conversation toward trust, leaning back as if simply sharing an idle thought. "Isn't it strange how easily people can betray the ones they love?" he mused, watching her from the corner of his eye. "I've never understood how someone could keep a secret like that." Lily stiffened, her expression frozen for a split second before she forced a smile. "Yeah, I guess some people just lose themselves," she replied, her voice trailing off. She laughed lightly, but her fingers gripped the edge of her wineglass a little too tightly. Ethan smiled, nodding slowly. "I suppose that's true." He let the silence settle between them, watching as she took a long sip of her wine, her gaze darting away from his. He could see the tension building in her, a tight coil she struggled to keep hidden, and he knew that his plan was working. Bit by bit, he was chipping away at her composure, leaving her to drown in her own unease. Later that night, after Lily had gone to bed, Ethan made his way to the office and opened her laptop. He had learned enough over the years to know her passwords and felt no guilt as he typed in the familiar phrase. The screen blinked to life, and he began scrolling through her recent messages, photos, anything that might reveal more about her secret life. It didn't take long to find what he was looking for. Buried in an email folder innocuously labeled personal were a series of messages exchanged with someone named Jay. The tone was intimate, filled with private jokes and plans to meet. The details were vague, carefully worded, but the implication was clear. Each message was a small betrayal, another fracture in the image of the woman he had once trusted implicitly. Ethan's gaze hardened as he read, each line confirming what he had already suspected. But what surprised him most was his own reaction. He felt no pangs of heartbreak, no sorrow or regret. Only a calm, detached clarity, a kind of ruthless focus that steeled his resolve. Lily had made her choice, and now he would make his. He forwarded the messages to his own email, leaving no trace of his actions, and closed the laptop, his mind already whirring with possibilities. He wouldn't confront her openly, not yet. Confrontation would be too direct, too merciful. He wanted her to feel the creeping realization that she was being watched, that her secrets were unraveling, one by one, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. As he stood in the doorway of their bedroom, watching her sleep peacefully, Ethan allowed himself a cold, calculating smile. She was blissfully unaware, lost in dreams, perhaps of that other life she had carved out for herself. but it was only a matter of time before her carefully crafted world would begin to crumble. He returned to his side of the bed, slipping beneath the covers and lying still, his gaze fixed on the ceiling. The path forward was clear. He would make no demands, no accusations. Instead, he would let her own guilt consume her, until she either confessed or broke under the weight of her lies. And when that day came, he would be ready, every piece of evidence meticulously arranged, every step leading her to the inevitable collapse she had set into motion herself. The days passed in a controlled chaos orchestrated by Ethan's quiet vengeance. He made every effort to appear the same calm kind, supportive, but beneath his placid exterior, he watched her every move, every change in her demeanor. Lily grew more distracted, her laughter more forced, her excuses increasingly brittle as he subtly chipped away at her peace of mind. The effect was undeniable. He could see it in her nervous smiles and the way her gaze skittered away from his when they spoke. She was unraveling slowly, caught between the facade she maintained and the gnawing doubt he was planting within her. One evening he suggested they spend time together by the lake, revisiting the spot that had once been theirs. Lily hesitated, her face momentarily clouding over before she nodded, the tension flickering briefly across her expression. The next day, Ethan arranged a picnic, carefully selecting each item with a precision that felt almost clinical. He knew what he was doing, knew that every familiar choice, their favorite wine, the old quilt they'd bought on an impulsive trip years ago, would unsettle her further. They drove in silence, the weight between them pressing down with every passing mile. By the time they arrived, the lake was bathed in the soft glow of twilight, the water a dark, reflective mirror stretching out before them. Ethan spread out the blanket near the shore, the old familiar scene tainted now by the knowledge of her betrayal. He watched as Lily settled stiffly across from him, her gaze drifting over the lake as if searching for an escape. They ate in near silence, the small talk forced, stilted. Ethan made sure to keep his expression open, encouraging, though he let his pauses linger just long enough to let her wonder, to let her feel the pressure of his watchful eye. Finally, as they finished their meal, he took a long sip of wine and broke the silence. "Do you remember when we first came here?" he asked, his voice soft but deliberate. She nodded, smiling faintly, though her eyes held a wariness he could almost taste. "Of course. It was a perfect day," she murmured, glancing away as if the memory pained her. "Yes," he replied, his tone thoughtful. "Everything was simpler then, clearer." Her fingers tightened around her wine glass and she shifted uncomfortably. "Things change," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "People change." He tilted his head, studying her. "That's true," he said quietly, his eyes sharp, unyielding. "But some things don't. Like trust, like honesty." She froze, her face paling slightly as his words sank in. He watched as she struggled to compose herself, to mask the fear that flickered across her expression. "Ethan," she began, but her voice faltered. He leaned forward, his gaze steady, unrelenting. "It's funny," he said. "Each word measured, how we think we know someone. How we can be so close and yet still feel so far away." She opened her mouth to reply, but the words seemed to catch in her throat. Her hands trembled slightly, and she quickly set down her glass, her mask slipping as the cracks in her composure widened. "Ethan, why are you saying this?" she whispered, a desperate edge to her voice. He let the silence stretch, watching her discomfort grow, savoring the dawning realization in her eyes. "Because I've been thinking, Lily, about us, about what we mean to each other." He paused, letting his gaze drift over the lake. "And about how some people think they can live two lives without consequence." Her face went pale, her breathing shallow. She looked as though she wanted to deny everything, to hold on to whatever thread of safety remained. But she was slipping, and they both knew it. "Ethan, I don't understand what you're saying." He gave her a small, sad smile, one that held none of the warmth that once did. "I think you do," he replied softly. He reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone where he had saved one of the messages from her affair. "Sometimes we don't even need to say anything at all. Sometimes the truth speaks for itself." Lily stared at the screen, her face frozen in horror as she read the familiar words she'd written herself, now weaponized against her. Her hands flew to her mouth, her expression a mixture of shock and dread. "Ethan, I can explain." He shook his head slowly, cutting her off. "No, Lily, I don't want to hear explanations. I've spent enough time hearing lies." He felt a wave of finality wash over him, the satisfaction of seeing her true self laid bare, stripped of all pretense. "This isn't about making things right. It's about letting you see what it feels like to be left in the dark, wondering when the truth will finally come to light. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she struggled to form words, her breath coming in shallow gasps. "Ethan, please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I'm sorry, I never meant to hurt you." "Maybe you didn't," he said, standing up, the weight of his decision sinking in. "But you did. And now we're here, where there's nothing left but the truth." Lily reached out as if to grasp him, as if some touch or plea could mend what she had broken. But he stepped back, leaving her hand grasping only empty air. "This place," he said, glancing over the lake, "was ours once. But now it's just a memory, just like us." She watched him, her face a mask of helpless grief, as he turned and walked back toward the car, leaving her behind by the water. Ethan didn't look back, he didn't need to. Her cries echoed softly behind him, a painful coda to the life they had once shared. But to him it was only silence now, an ending he'd long accepted, and a future she would have to face alone.